cloud. Awesome. So hi, hello, and welcome to Culture Fix. Today we're talking about how to create change independent of or regardless of what's happening in our electoral systems. We just had an election in the US and 2 days later are still waiting for the outcome, but also looking at how, in the system that the US has where your vote doesn't necessarily count and these systems decide really for you, and rich companies like Uber and Lyft can buy legislation that harms workers. And so really looking at how maybe voting and electoral processes aren't the way to create the kind of change that we need and we want. And so rather than focusing on that, we're gathering here today to talk about what are our other options and what have people around the world across time been doing. For those of you who are new, Culture Fix is a global network of artists and activists and entrepreneurs and creative people who really work at the intersection of art and social change with a global perspective. So even though the election is happening here in the US now, that doesn't mean that it doesn't have repercussions around the world, and that the work that we all do impacts one another in different ways. So just to get us started, I want to share a couple real quick kind of grounding agreements so that folks feel safe to talk and share. We ask that you just speak from your own experience and try to avoid generalizations. We ask that you give credit where credit is due. So as much as possible, if you're quoting people or referring to other people, making sure that they're given the name, they're named for their work. We're a small group and we really, I can't stress enough how much we try to be interactive. So please feel free to step up and use the chat, unmute yourself, talk to one another, but also step aside so other people can speak up. Sometimes we do talk about things that might be triggering or challenging. And so we ask that you're mindful of that in the space and just ask for permission before you proceed with something that might be a little difficult for folks. The chat function is open for the whole group, but it's also open for people to privately message each other. We definitely encourage you to do that. If you hear something that someone says and you want to talk further or connect more deeply, we encourage that kind of networking and collaboration, but please don't be a creep. And if you're creeping in someone's DMs, just tell me and I will remove that person. If someone is creeping in your DMs, just tell me and I will remove them, no questions asked, because we have a no-go policy for that. And then finally, we acknowledge that we're all learning. None of us are experts. We all have a lot of growth to do. And so this is a space to make those mistakes and say the imperfect things if that's where you're at, but acknowledge them. And so when someone might point that out to you, to really give yourself space to acknowledge that you might have made a mistake and learn from that. Are there any agreements that folks want to add that you're not seeing on this list? Or are we good with these? Cool. I see the thumbs up. Awesome. So to get us started, wanted to jump in with a quick round of introductions and then we'll get into the conversation. I'm Nora. I'm a creative consultant. I help artists around the world use their platforms for good, but also be successful without having to give up their financial freedom or their creative control. And I founded Culture Fix with Natalie 6 years ago. Nat, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, quickly. I'm Natalie Crüe. I am a cultural producer and community organizer. I work with tons of nonprofits and organizations doing social impact work, and I'm in the background doing things for Culture Fix right now. So I'm going to pass it to whoever wants to go next.
Thanks, Nat. Elise, do you want to go next?
Sorry, I thought you were just doing like speaker introductions, but yes, I'm happy to introduce.
Everyone matters.
Hi, everyone. I'm Elise. I work in higher ed at the moment. I'm a former, way back in the day, I was an intern for Culture Fix. So that's how I know Nat and Nora, and happy to be here.
Thanks. Allison, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Hey, my name is Allison. I'm I'm also a cultural producer, actually. I work at Mazel's Documentary Center, primarily, and then sort of freelance and work on various projects with various different artists, some of whom I have a lot of overlapping connections with Nora, which is kind of how I wound up in this. Happy to be here.
Thanks, Allison. Gloria?
Hi, I'm Gloria. I have been working in education for a long time already in different fields, but my career is not like definable because it's not stable. My activism has been mostly revolving around reproductive rights and women's right to not get killed. Well, also in my activism and education work, well, we've been trying to challenge the only narrative and the dominant narrative. In my context, it's a little bit more difficult to be a leftist than it's maybe everywhere in the world, even in other places within Mexico. So that's where I am.
Thanks, Gloria. And so our guests today are Roqy and Boima and Guerra, who I'll have them introduce themselves to. Boima, you want to start us off?
Okay, my name is Boima Tucker. I am a musician, but I'm also a publisher, editor of writing, and I got into writing via music writing. And I currently edit the Africa's a Country website, which was started as a website to challenge challenge mainstream media's depiction of Africa, and has since evolved into a platform for leftist views on and from the continent of Africa and the diaspora. So that's what I spend my day job on. And then I also produce and release music under the name Chief Boima and International Black. I do a range of music from African traditional music to hip hop. I got a Cuban hip hop EP that I'm working on right now. So, yeah.
Thanks, Boima. Guerra?
Me?
Yes, please.
Hi, everybody. My name is David Guerra. I am from Barcelona, from a small town, Barcelona. I'm graphic designer, desktop publisher. Also, I'm a hip hop activist in my small in a small term. Right now, I'm a little bit off, but resuming my task doing a new radio show in my hometown, and also I'm in a political left far left party named COOP. I don't know if you know what it is. It's a popular unit party that is set in almost every town in Catalonia. And I'm in our local chapter doing local job. Basically, that's it.
Thank you. Roqy?
Oh, excuse me. My name is Roqy Tyraid. I'm an MC. As of recently, I've more of a activist myself. Lead organizer for a group called the Reliance Project here in Phoenix, Arizona. One of the main initiatives was to attempt to do what we seem to have done the other day, just turn this into a more progressive location. And I'm really hard on talking about myself. It's just really honored to be amongst a lot of powerful, beautiful individuals here. So respect.
Thanks, Roqy.
Respect.
Thank you. And Chris, just in time for introductions, welcome to Culture Fix. We're just doing quick, like, who are you? If you want to introduce yourself real quick.
Sure. Hey, I'm Chris. Thanks for your patience. I was trying to figure out, I put in my wrong email address. I wasn't getting the confirmation. I was able to figure it out, luckily. So glad to be with y'all. As you can see from the Zoom, my name is Chris Knight. I live in San Francisco. I'm a coach. I'm a professional coach, and can do that in my part-time. I also work for a youth serving organization here in San Francisco. So really just looking for more opportunities to connect to people doing good work. And the 2020 was really showing me that I got a lot of wonderful people in my life that I love and have been a part of my life for a really long time, but I don't think are necessarily like my tribe. And so looking to continue to search to find my tribe, and that's part of what brought me here.
Awesome. Thanks for being here. So let's jump into it. The chat is open, so we'll have a little bit of a conversation with our panelists. Please use the chat to kind of contribute to the conversation. Also, Zoom has these really fun reactions that we encourage you to use as we get into the conversation, and then we'll open it up for kind of a larger discussion where everyone can kind of participate. I want to start with something that actually Boima had tweeted around, like, every 4 years we come to this space of like anxiety and uncertainty, but also the idea of like waiting every 4 years to see if change will actually change. And then is that the kind of change we even want? And so I want to start with this question of how effective is voting in creating radical change, and what that's been like for you all in your experiences. And Boima, maybe you can start us off.
Yeah, I thought maybe I could just preface whatever I say with a little background of how I got interested in the idea of democracy. And that started with, actually, Nora and I spent some time in Liberia during the 2011 presidential elections. Mm-hmm. And we were there as like interns for foreign international organizations that were meant to observe, or like there was a international large accountability presence in the country in order to make sure that Liberians could figure out how to do democracy, which sounds ridiculous that you have, a foreign force coming in teaching you how to be, govern yourself. But we were part of this force, and that really taught me. And actually, I was doing a master's degree at the time, and I ended up writing about youth participation in West Africa in the democratic process. And what I found was that in that research and in that writing is that actually voting was really a outside imposed institution onto, and what, as it happens in a lot of African contexts, is that it's like a incompletely instituted process in order to have the perception of being a democratic society. And really that had nothing to do with what democracy looked like on the ground in the country. And so that's where my interest in kind of questioning what democracy means. And really, from that starting point, the first question is that, like, elections and democracy, while elections can be part of a democratic process, are not one and the same. They're not equivalents. And elections in themselves do not make up democracy. And democracy itself is not only made up of elections. And so I think starting from that point, that kind of answers your question, is that, like, even the initial definition of democracy from the Greek period, is where we got this word from the ancient Greece and the ancient philosophers, is that it just means rule by the people, by the masses. It says nothing about elections. It says nothing about every 4 years. It says nothing about presidents or legislatures or nothing. It just means rule by the people. And then throughout history, for the past however many thousands of years, humans have tried to define that. And a lot of what the world calls democracy today has been imposed by a European system created during imperial expansion. So, you know, we are the inheritors of that legacy. And yeah, that's it. That's all I'll say for now.
Roqy and Guerra, I saw head nods from both of you. I'm curious what you have to add. Roqy, can you unmute yourself?
Yeah, So when people talk, I'm like one of those people who want to be like, yeah, that's right. So I just automatically mute myself. Yeah, I definitely agree. Just rule by the people, and that's one of the things that we are trying to instill in our demonstrators. We had, we have been protesting since the 26th of May, and one of the things we were trying to empower people with is the knowledge that we are the system. You know, we are democracy, not this idea of, you know, like Boima was saying, every 4 years or this specific type of government. But we are the sayers. We're the ones with the influence at the end of the day. And if we can galvanize behind specific ideas and represent the most underrepresented, then we're able to truly see change, especially if we work in concert with each other. So yeah, I'm gonna keep it short and simple. I really agree with that.
Roqy, that makes me think about the idea of democracy is majority rules, right? And sometimes when we're pushing for radical change, the majority wants to preserve power rather than change power or shift power. And so is that even an effective way of talking about change? Is whatever the majority wants versus, and what does that do to the voice of maybe not the numerical majority, but the people who are pushing for change that benefit? Do you know what I'm trying to say? I think there's this idea of like numerical versus what's actually radical or shifting power. And sometimes those two things are in opposition. And so I'm curious how you all approach it. And then I want to ask you about this around independence in Catalonia. But Roqy, I'm curious how that shows up as you all are organizing.
I mean, because, you know, like I was saying, you know, we could look at our individual standpoints and think from the standpoint of individuality, but if you look at the experiences of the underrepresented and how they're affected by the changes that we seek, because we think from a selfish standpoint, you know, if you look from their standpoint, then you're able to bring equality and equity to the table. So in terms of the whole numerical standpoint, we've been trying to get people to understand that you lead with empathy in these moments. You can't think about what benefits the majority. You have to think about the people who don't have the loudest voices. So even in our fringe society or our groups and demographics, there still is a minority versus majority, you know, culture. So, you know, we try to lead with that mindset that we have to take care of those who don't have the loudest voices. And with that, you're stronger, you know, like as they say, like a machine is only as good as its worst part, you know, or its weakest part. So that's what we've been applying. And I feel that in a very historically racist and bigoted system here in Arizona, even if we didn't create somewhat of a blue change or a blue wave, it's a blue tide. And I know that goes to bipartisanship, and we don't really care for that per se. But what I meant is, for the first time, you see people, at least in our demographic, who didn't feel confident in being represented, feel like they can make an impact. And it's been good thus far.
Guerra, I'm curious to hear from you about this. And maybe you could talk a little bit about the independence movement in Catalonia and the referendum that happened a little while back, and how that approach has worked or hasn't worked for folks.
Actually, despite of the results, because 3 years ago, if you don't know, we forced to have a referendum to decide about the independence of Catalonia. But it was a referendum not tolerated by the Spanish government. They didn't allow us to put ballots and to vote. So we decided to make it by ourselves, and we made all the infrastructure. We built all the structure to let people vote, and even with thousands of police coming from other parts of Spain to stop the voting day, we vote, and more than 2 million people voted, and was shocking because was the power of the people who made this. The result was the we back up in the last minute. Our government decided to back off, and didn't proclaim the independence at last minute. And then Spanish government um, joined the room like an elephant and start impersonating people and judging people, and almost destroyed the core movement. But still, we are fighting. So it's an example of how people can build something totally apart, or forcing politics to assume our theory, because Catalan government was not in the mood of declaring independence, or doing some referendum. Was the people who forced the Catalan government to put the ballots, and to do the things. So power to the people.
Can I ask a question, David?
Yeah, of course.
I really wonder how the current progressive movement in Spain draw or are inspired by, or even materially connected to the history of the Spanish Republic before the Civil War, and if they're drawing on those kind of political organizations or ideas that maybe are inherited from that time period.
There is a huge movement of republicanism in Spain, and people that is fighting to set up the republic again, and throw up the monarchy. And there's a lot of people trying to do this, to set up a referendum to vote if we want a king or not. But it's difficult because the status quo in Spain, as we came from 40 years of dictatorship, and all the heirs of the dictator, even the ministers that were in the first stages of democracy, were actually ministers in Franco's dictatorship. So it was something like cleaning, just a little bit of makeup, a little bit of clean the image, but nothing changed. All police forces, all police superiors were coming from the Franco dictatorship. So it's very difficult to try to implement a republic, or try to fight for the republic, because everything is set up, very, very set up from the very beginning.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, because the question about majority, or like, what is the will? What is the will of the people if nothing changes? And you have the question about what is minorities' role in a democracy, and I think the definition of democracy that we're often given is one that benefits that perspective that upholds the status quo, right? Whereas there's the definition of democracy, like I said, is not set in stone. And there's, in the world of philosophy, there's definition of democracy that says minorities speaking out is the definition of democracy, or minorities being able to shift the winds of change. And I think is democratic. And I think part of the way you get through that is one of the things that, like, there's a great video on YouTube called Why Socrates Hated Democracy, or something like that. And because the original Greek philosophers believed that democracy was an active process, that always should be in flux, and that no society is, there's bad democracies and good democracies, and a good democracy is one that in which people are active, educating themselves, educating their neighbors, creating free voluntary association with themselves to be able to create a better society. And I think you can have a democracy that creates a worse society for humanity in the world. That's totally possible. You know, we tend to uphold democracy without ever questioning, you know, whether it's driving us a good path or a bad path. So, yeah.
I mean,
Totally true.
So that leads me to our next question around what are examples of what change has looked like outside of these electoral systems? Like, what does democratic change look like in practice? And Roqy, I know this is an area that you're doing a lot of work in, so maybe you can start us off here.
Hey, what is examples of? I'm sorry, examples of change. One more time, could you?
Yeah, of how sociopolitical change is happening in practice without reliance on electoral politics or kind of like traditional democratic systems.
Well, I mean, just the idea of people getting out there and expressing their voice and working in concert with one another, like I was saying earlier, like it's created this ecosystem where we can not only look to make, when it comes down to the election season, to put the right individuals in position, like the right district attorney, for instance, and things of that nature. But even like grassroots organizations that are community focused, that take care of the people with 100% transparency, just creating this esoteric universe of where everything is just community focused. So that's one of the things that we've seen not only in the past 6 months of in this season of protests, but over the past couple of years. I can name drop organizations all day that provide specific services that did not exist about 10 or so years ago. And it's just because of this gradual shift in consciousness. And especially now with COVID and everybody kind of having time today, it's just kind of expedited the process. And especially with what we've been doing in the past 150, 200 days or whatever. But I feel that, and that's one of the reasons why, even if it reverts back to the same system of oppression that we've been pushing against since the end of May, I feel very confident that when it comes back around, how we're talking about the 4 years and stuff, that, or even with the special elections and all in specific political opportunities, we'll be ready. And there's a lot of confidence out in the air. It's to the point where the individuals who were spreading false narrative, these Trumpers and right-wing extremists, the way they painted us in the light, it's like we've reflected that back upon them, and they're the ones who are now being viewed by people even outside of our universe as those who are the perpetrators of like dissension and undermining of the society out here in Maricopa County. So I think that's one really big example, like legitimate, tangible change.
Boima or Guerra, do you have examples or ideas?
At our in the sense of community or people that can bring some change, acting besides the political scenario. I have the example of the here in Spain is named PA, is the platform of people affected by the mortgages. People that have problems with the mortgage of their homes, and they face the eviction from their homes, and people organize into this platform to stop the evictions, and they go when there is an eviction plan for tomorrow in for example in my town, all the people of the platform near my town goes to confront the police to stop the eviction. And this is a movement that has been spread across whole Spain, and it's very powerful because it's a direct confrontation to the banks that own the mortgages and to the police, and it's very powerful because it's totally out of the political scenario, but gives a lot of um, power from the core, from the base, and things like this are the ones that make people stay strong and build something powerful. And people from the political parties are aware about this. And if they are smart and they see it from a leftist perspective, they want to have these people as a ally. You know, my English is a little messy today.
No. It's perfect. And actually that makes me think of, there are similar kind of organizing networks in East LA and places in Southern California where gentrification is happening very quickly and people are being pushed out of their homes. Gloria mentions the rent strikes in the Bay Area, where similar, the community shows up and says, no, right? We're not gonna leave, or we're gonna stay here. And to me, what that highlights is how much, when we talk about change, the emphasis tends to be on, like, let's change the entire US government system, or, these like big, broad national, but really the most effective things are happening in small, local, community ways, which in my perspective is very much the most kind of anti-capitalistic way we can get, when we come back and focus on the community and the relationships and our networks, to say we're going to take care of each other regardless of what these like external factors are telling us. And so when we talk about like what solutions look like, it's really kind of small and local and communal, still acting in relation to what's happening elsewhere, right? Nothing happens in a vacuum. But I think that's really important. And the other thing for me that comes up is how easy it is to dismiss the idea of change as, the kind of stuff that we talk about as, oh, it's radical. And so that's such a dismissive thing. Oh, that can't ever happen. And so when we start to have these conversations, or artists start to talk about it, and we see, the stuff that Roqy's talking about, or the stuff that Guerra's talking about, that it's no longer such a like impossible thing. And so the possibility that that creates then starts to make it more tangible. I'm curious, guys, and after this question, we'll open it up to everybody because I'm seeing the comments in the chat already. In terms of starting to mobilize people beyond voting, right? What are things that work, and how do we start to engage people to take that kind of action? Besides like, all right, I voted, I'm done, like I've done my piece, but how do we start to mobilize people beyond that?
Can I?
Yeah, go ahead, Guerra, and then Boima, I see you.
Working locally. It's the only way to make it work in a big scale. I think from my experience, as I told before, I'm on this political party named CUP, that it's built in town by town. But when we decide to jump to the political arena in Catalonia, just for the whole community, we had the experience of working in municipally, working in our towns. So we know how to do things first. So I think the only way to make the people from the upper scenario, to force them to do things, is to work locally and keep going, keep going, keep going, keep going, but not waiting them to do things, but forcing them to do things. If we want more social um, interest, we have to force them to do this kind of things. But we have to do it with our communities, in our towns, in our cities, in our districts. I think is the only way to do it.
Mm-hmm. Boima, you had something you wanted to add.
Yeah, I think this election in the U.S. has really illustrated something about what, you know, I've always had the perception over the past 10 years, whatever, looking back a few years, is that like there's a sense of apathy about politics in the US. And I think Donald Trump really opened up, Donald Trump and a few other things like Black Lives Matter and you know, COVID and all this stuff kind of coming to a head this year has really opened up this desire for enfranchisement. And, you know, in 2016, I grew up in Milwaukee. I know in 2016, Trump won the state of Wisconsin by the Republicans gerrymandering and voter suppression, votes to disenfranchise largely the Black community in Milwaukee. And this time around, activists on the ground worked very hard to get people involved. And after the first COVID election that we ran in March, I was in town for that. And there was this realization that's like, oh, we're gonna have to work to vote. Like, this isn't just like show up, vote, but we're gonna have to work to be represented. And the organizations that came out of that are a baseline for people to be active, right? And part of it is the culture work. That is what I've really invested in my own personal work, is like through media and culture is really trying to enfranchise, education is part of that. But then I look in California and in my community, I'm in Santa Rosa, which is north of San Francisco, about an hour. And, you know, there's conservative Trump supporter type people here, which is probably more reflective of Arizona, where Roqy is, than San Francisco. And they've gotten the first representation from Roseland, which is a majority Latino district in Santa Rosa. They've passed oversight of the sheriff, who the sheriff murdered a young man in Roseland a few years back. They passed a lot of progressive reform through local activism in a place that you wouldn't necessarily think would be open to some of these things. You know, you never know, because it is the Bay Area. But at the same time, and the national trend is going, but at the same time, all these propositions on a statewide level in California failed. So it's like, you know, people sometimes only become enfranchised when they think that the change is immediate and things that they can see. And I don't think we're at a point yet where we can see, besides the president, which is in our face every day and he's tweeting and everybody's talking about him, and that's something that we're like, this is tangible, he's affecting our daily lives. You know, like he says that Black Lives Matter is terrorist. We need to fight that. But like Uber and Lyft, like we just let them slide because, you know, it's like, it's, you know, so part of it is really, for me, like I feel where my ability to affect change is in the cultural side, the education side is, you know, through media and that. But, you know, I'm also very inspired by the on the ground work that people are doing to create community and affect change locally. And I think the move is to bring these efforts together so that you create a network of progressive action. And like, look what happened in Milwaukee, look what's happened in Philadelphia. They brought Philadelphia out in record numbers. They brought Atlanta. They might flip Georgia, like the deep South Georgia might flip to blue because of Atlanta, right? And so I think what it takes is a lot of these orgs becoming aware of each other, and, you know, this is part of it.
Oh my gosh, can I jump in, because both Boima and David have me. And Gloria, I saw you could jump in because I've talked a lot. I thought if you're about to talk, let me.
No, go ahead, Roqy. Go ahead.
Okay,
Roqy.
yo, what both of y'all said was oh, so spot on. Like organizations working with each other, being aware of each other, what we're doing, and so we can again work in concert. But starting at a local level, educating individuals on just how the system works, working from a local standpoint. It's not just about casting your vote. It's about letting these people know that we're educated on what we're voting on. We've taken the time to read this and have that dialogue with each other, whether it's online, whether it's at rallies, whether it's at like physical events or what have you, Zoom meetings and things of that nature. But if these politicians know that not only we're gonna like vet you before we put you in office, but we're going to keep you under the biggest magnifying glass, they'll feel nothing but like they will feel compelled to listen to the people. I mean, it's one of those individuals right now where there's are situations right now where there's an individual who they've won their office, and we're attempting to push specific issues about things that are affecting, even from a demonstrative standpoint, some of the protesters and how they're being slapped with, crazy felonies, and, how they're being labeled as terrorists, labeled as gang members. And it's like, okay, well, if you don't want, unless you want this to be your highest political seat, you better listen to the people. And, told people that it is sexy to show up to city hall meetings and things of that nature, and to spend a week reading what all these initiatives mean and how it directly affects the community. And so we'll just crash the city council meetings, and we'll figure out a way to shift that dialogue towards things that are directly impacting us. Like again, like how y'all were talking about earlier, like sometimes it just takes working from the ground level. You can't build a house from the attic. You got to start from the basement and work all the way up. So like that's been one of the biggest strengths that we've had over the past 6 months, is people realizing that this isn't going to be an overnight change. This is an incremental revolution. This is something that this is a torch that was handed from our ancestors. It was a little harder for them. It's harder for our parents. It's hard for us. It's going to be less hard for our children, and even less hard for our grandchildren. And if you instill that in people's mindset, then they feel that, okay, I'm going to get this bit of work done, and then we're going to eventually pass this on. And since we've been implementing that like knowledge when it comes to how to apply ourselves, even other organizations like your elder orgs and stuff like that, and even some people who are in different levels of politics have, not only taken notice of what's been going on out here in Phoenix, but in a sense, they feel like they've had like cathartic moments. And now, certain cities out here want to sit down and discuss how they can do the whole eight can wait, and various ways of starting the process of defunding police and stuff like that. Never would have thought this was possible. And it's all because we were thinking from, the most concentrated local standpoint. So yeah, oh man, y'all have me inspired right there.
And I think something that Boima touched on too is the creative component to all of this, that it isn't like you watch a commercial and you're like, okay, now I'm active, but multiple kind of touch points or entry points, and the role of art and culture in making those things both accessible in terms of understanding what this means and what it looks like, but also accessible in terms of starting to engage in it, right? I think in some ways, what we think of as traditional kind of activism or like electoral activism has been like wearing a suit and going to lobby, or knocking on people's doors, in these kind of, I don't know, bougie, exclusionary ways of engaging. And when we start to approach it from a more creative, more artistic perspective, now it opens it up for everybody. And creates more entry points and access points for people who might not have seen themselves in that space, can now start to see themselves as, oh, well, maybe I am part of this world. Maybe there is space for me. I wanted to open it up because I see the chat is going off a little bit, and see if people have questions or thoughts. I think Gloria had a question earlier about the importance of language, and if we need a different kind of language to speak about some of these things that we're talking about. And Gloria, I don't know if you want to say more about that question, or just open it up to anyone else who has thoughts. Go ahead, Gloria.
Okay, I'll follow up on that one. I'm thinking, starting with, say, Donald Trump censoring education about racism and like censoring the phrase systemic racism or white privilege. And that's like a linguistic move to like influence how people talk. And I'm also hearing David talk about Catalonia. Um, I'm also like asking myself if there could be also this linguistic element in the difference between Catalan and Castellano. And like this, because even in my own front, I face people who have this weird allegiance to the monarchy of Spain, and they reflect that in defending the Real Academia, and they use the Real Academia to oppress our like even indigenous people, mixing up their original language with Spanish, or off in the border developing a Spanglish dialect, or even feminists trying to um, like create a gender neutral language or using the X suffix in Latinx. And even people in the US are like, oh no, using the X is wrong because the RAE says it's wrong. And like, why are you obeying a royal academy when there's like all these people rebelling against it? So there's like a linguistic independence going on from Spain, you know? So, okay, I'm gonna let David add to it.
Wow. I feel you, Gloria, and you are the la resistance, la resistencia in front of the Spanish king. So, I give you a dip in my heart. So the point is that the language can be a dangerous tool, a dangerous weapon to create the perception of your world. Hopefully, here in Catalonia, almost the majority of people is bilingual because our educational system is set up in Catalan, but also Spanish is the main language of the core language for everybody. So almost everybody speaks both languages perfectly, but differences come from one another. And Spanish is actually can be a tool of oppression. So English can be too, because both are colonialistic languages. And I guess the way we use the words can define the way we see the world. And now you were saying about the Trump administration, speaking in a certain way, speaking with certain words that fit in the whole conception of the of United States. No, it's not new. It's something that a linguist, a Jewish linguist called Victor Klemperer, I guess, he wrote an essay called "The Language in the Third Reich." That is very interesting because analyzed the way that Nazis used to implement new words to change the perception of reality. And this is what the Trump administration was doing, in my opinion.
Elise or Allison, Chris, Brianna, I want to open it up and make sure we get a chance to hear from y'all if you have questions or thoughts on anything we've been discussing today.
I just really resonated with what you were saying, kind of about like how it's not just in the the big actions of like voting for president. Like I've been in this like group chat, I guess, with like some friends from high school who've just like been obsessive about the like who's winning the presidential election. And yesterday I asked them if they like knew what had happened in their local elections, and nobody knew. And it was just like sort of shocking to me because I've been following mine quite closely and finding that actually like much more empowering in a different way to like involve myself in that way. And they just seemed like it was just kind of a like wake up call of like, oh my God, people really like, they like talk the talk in some ways, and then they really like just don't do the work sometimes. So like understanding that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's also something about let's focus on the election and not focus on my personal responsibility to make conscious choices every day to make the world a better place for the people around me. So I'll just keep ordering from Amazon, but I voted, as if like those two things, you know, don't exist in the same space. Elise, I see you unmuted yourself. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I was just going to agree. And I feel like I personally have gone through a very gradual journey of understanding how important it is to like be more involved at that local level and pay attention to everything on your ballot and not just big elections. So I've been kind of trying to think about how to get more and more people on board with that and encourage in a way that doesn't turn people off, you know, the people in your life, at least that you can impact. One of my good friends, several months ago, she organized a few of us to have a study hall about all of the propositions in California. And we each like presented on one of them to everybody else. And it was like a cool idea because it forced us all to think about it and take the time. And it was like, why have we not done this kind of thing before? But I feel like more and more people are paying attention to that. And I just want to keep building on that momentum now and finding, more ways to spread that kind of awareness and civic engagement.
I want to be mindful. It's almost the hour, so I want to be mindful of everyone's time. I know Rocky's like, wow, that went by so fast. So
Yeah,
Natalie's,
what happened?
right? Time flies when you're having a good time with good people. Natalie's going to drop in the chat a link to kind of our Culture Fix database. It's a network of like good people around the world who are doing good things. There's a chance on there for you to just like look at who else is kind of in the network. People make asks. So what do folks need help with? Maybe there's a place to connect, but also if you have something that you can offer, maybe someone needs that. So please, if you get a chance and you want to, you know, put your information on there and take a look at and connect with it. Culture Fix is always here to support you in the work that you're doing. So if there's things that we can amplify, or you're interested in collaborating, or you just like want to connect with someone, you're like, I need to find someone in Ghana who's doing really amazing production work, like we'll be matchmaker for you. Really want to thank all of you for just hanging out with us and being part of this conversation today. And please continue to take care of yourselves and each other, because we're only as strong as our communities. Thank y'all. Enjoy the rest of your day. Don't get too stressed out. Take care of yourselves. And we'll see you next time.